Eddie Griffin's car crash. It happened in the early morning hours in Houston. Griffin was driving a Nissan SUV, and for reasons no one fully understands, he went through a railroad crossing where the gate was already down, lights flashing, and warning systems blaring. The train wasn't stopped. He slammed into the side of a Union Pacific freight train, and the impact lit everything up instantly. The SUV exploded into flames. A nearby rail car full of plastic granules also caught fire, adding fuel to the disaster. The flames were so extreme that the authorities had to use dental records just to confirm it was him. His body was completely unrecognizable. When the toxicology report came back, it showed his blood alcohol level was 0.26%. That's more than 3 times the legal limit in Texas. No narcotics turned up though, not a trace of barbiturates or cocaine. The official cause of death? Multiple blunt force injuries. The fire was devastating, but the impact itself is what killed him. Still, not everything added up. Investigators couldn't find any skid marks, no braking, no last-second swerve, just straight through. That made some people start asking bigger questions. Was it a mistake? Was it something else? The reports didn't say suicide, but they didn't completely rule it out either. It's one of those cases where the facts tell you what happened, but not why. Griffin had battled personal issues for years. It's just gutting how it all ended like that, in one moment, in flames, with more questions left behind than answers. Mark Jackson's death threats. During his time coaching the Golden State Warriors from 2011 to 2014, Jackson made headlines not just for what happened on the court, but for what was going on behind the scenes. He publicly stated in an interview that he received death threats while holding that position, and it wasn't vague internet noise. These were threats serious enough that team security had to step in. Jackson said some of those threats were even left at his home. He didn't name names or give much detail about who was responsible, but he did suggest the threats were connected to his coaching style, outspoken religious beliefs, and ongoing tension inside the organization. It wasn't just a few people being dramatic online. These threats were taken seriously. His coaching era was full of contrasts. The team had success, but there was real friction within the franchise. Reports pointed to conflicts with certain assistant coaches and some members of the front office. That atmosphere created an unstable foundation. Even though wins were piling up, Jackson's firm stance on religion and strong personality clearly made waves. Whether people agreed with his methods or not, the fact that things escalated to the point of involving security shows how deep the discord ran. While there's still no public confirmation about who sent those threats or exactly why, Jackson himself confirmed they happened. And in the world of professional sports, that kind of turmoil behind closed doors can mean the beginning of the end for any coach. For Jackson, it was part of what made his Warriors stint so polarizing and ultimately short-lived. Dennis Scott's camp outburst. In July of 1997, Scott pulled one of the most bizarre moves in youth camp history. At a basketball camp in Virginia, packed with over 100 kids, including his own 10-year-old son, he drove his SUV straight onto the court, blasted explicit rap music, and launched into a speech that had everyone confused. He told the kids not to ask for autographs. Instead, he wanted them to ask about the rage that exists inside me. He was 28 years old at the time, still with the Orlando Magic and clearly fed up. He was furious about contract negotiations and his $3 million salary. Then a camper asked if he used drugs. That flipped a switch. He later said he was embarrassed, especially in front of his son, and that question set off his reaction. The camp ended early. Scott left, but returned a few hours later to sign autographs for the few dozen kids still around. Afterward, he issued an apology through his agent, admitted it was an overreaction, and confirmed he was drug-free and healthy. He went even further, offering full refunds, nearly $28,000 in total, and donating another $3,800 to local youth basketball. Loudoun County officials called it a satisfactory response and didn't ban him from future events. Media outlets covered every detail. Kids were stunned, parents were baffled, and now, years later, the moment's remembered as one of the weirdest emotional meltdowns in NBA off-court history. That phrase, "the rage inside me," still lives on. People joke about it, but in that moment, it was real and raw. A frustrated pro athlete let it all out in front of a gym full of kids. By the way, if you guys want to subscribe, I'm going to be posting every day. Thanks. Anyways, Derrick Rose's civil trial. In August of 2013, a woman accused Rose and 2 friends of drugging and raping her in her Beverly Hills apartment. They had been at his place earlier, drinking, and she claimed she woke up sore, disoriented, and covered in lubricant. 2 years later, in August of 2015, she filed a civil lawsuit asking for over $21 million in damages. The trial kicked off in October of 2016 with an 8-person jury seated in federal court. Rose and his co-defendants said everything was consensual. They pointed to past texts, including ones where the woman used sexual language. Rose admitted under oath that he struggled to define consent, which raised eyebrows. The trial wasn't short on drama. The plaintiff broke down crying on the stand. The defense wanted her tears stopped mid-testimony, but the judge said no. A detective tied to the investigation died by suicide during the trial, adding a bizarre and tragic turn. Defense attorneys also took heat for bringing up her sexual history repeatedly, with critics calling it inappropriate. In the end, the jury found Rose and the others not liable. It wasn't a criminal case, so the ruling didn't say he was innocent, just that he wasn't financially responsible under civil law. No criminal charges were ever filed, although police kept looking into the situation at the time. 2 years later, her appeal was denied. That ended the legal battle in court. Rose walked away without having to pay, but the case left a cloud over everything. It was messy, emotional, and full of tension. Every part of it was on record, but the verdict didn't erase the impact the case had on his career and reputation. Paul Pierce's stabbing. On September 25, 2000, Pierce was attacked at the Buzz Club in Boston. It started after some kind of argument. Reports say he was dancing too close to someone, maybe a woman's sibling, and it escalated fast. One guy smashed a bottle over his head, then multiple men stabbed him 11 times. His face, neck, and back were all hit. One stab even punctured a lung. His teammates, Toney and Batty's brother, didn't waste time. They got him to the hospital immediately, and doctors performed lung surgery to save him. It was a violent, near-fatal situation. You'd think that would end a player's season. Instead, Pierce suited up and started all 82 games that year. Not only did he play, he balled out, averaging over 25 points per game. Just a few weeks after major surgery, he was back on the court, delivering one of the best scoring seasons of his career. But physically, healing didn't mean he was fine. Pierce later shared that he struggled hard mentally. Depression, anxiety, paranoia. He didn't feel safe in public for a long time. He battled PTSD and kept most of it quiet while trying to lead on the court. The media highlighted his toughness, but the reality was way more complicated. That night changed him. It didn't just scar his body. It rewired how he lived his life. Fans online still point to it as a symbol of resilience, but Pierce made it clear it was also a turning point. He lived through something brutal, kept it together in front of the world, and kept playing. But behind the scenes, it left real damage, not just a comeback story, a trauma story with a stat line. Larry Sanders' NBA exit. In August of 2013, Sanders signed a 4-year deal worth $44 million with the Milwaukee Bucks. By early 2015, he walked away from it. The buyout cost him about $21 million, but for him, that was the trade-off. He'd hit a wall. In December of 2014, he checked himself into Rogers Memorial Hospital to get treatment for anxiety, depression, and mood disorders. Around that same time, he had a stress-related breakdown during a Christmas Eve practice under Coach Jason Kidd. His whole body cramped. After that, he couldn't bring himself to go back. 2 months later, he released a video and article through the Players Tribune. He said basketball didn't define him. He was a person first. He spoke about the pressure to be a product, an ATM, and how he felt like his voice no longer mattered. The game, he said, wasn't worth the mental and emotional damage. Sanders made it clear. Happiness, peace, and relationships mattered more than millions. He gave up the rest of that contract and walked away at a time when barely anyone in pro sports talked about mental health. His brief return in 2017 with the Cavaliers didn't last. He played 5 games, then got waived, but his impact didn't end there. He became a leading voice for mental health in sports. He pursued music, art, and overseas basketball. Sanders' story wasn't just about leaving money behind. It was about choosing well-being over expectation and being one of the first in the league to say out loud that mental health matters more than a contract. Kendrick Nunn's battery plea. In March of 2016, Nunn was arrested in Champaign, Illinois on a misdemeanor domestic battery charge. The accusations were serious. He was accused of hitting a woman, pushing her to the ground, and pouring water, or possibly hot water, on her during an argument in her apartment. He eventually pleaded guilty to a lesser battery charge. That plea meant other charges were dropped as part of the deal. He turned himself in, posted bond, and faced the consequences. As a result, he was dismissed from the University of Illinois basketball team. The court laid out a series of conditions. Nunn had to complete community service, go through a 26-week domestic abuse prevention program, write an apology letter, and serve 18 months of court supervision. He then transferred to Oakland University, where he had to sit out a season under NCAA rules. After that, He picked up his career again and eventually found his way to the NBA. But the case didn't just disappear. When Nunn began gaining attention during the 2019 season with the Heat, the incident resurfaced. In a 2018 interview, he said he'd grown a lot since then, but also made comments that critics said minimized the victim's claims. He was never charged with a felony, but the misdemeanor plea, the admission of wrongdoing, and the consequences that followed were all very real. Even now, people point back to that case when discussing his career. It's a reminder that every player brings more than a stat sheet. For Nunn, his legal history is as much a part of the conversation as anything he's done on the court. Shawn Livingston's knee injury. February 26, 2007, Livingston took a routine fast break. What followed was anything but routine. He went up for a layup, landed awkwardly, and his left knee collapsed beneath him in a way that made teammates and fans look away in shock. The injury wasn't just bad, it was catastrophic. He tore the ACL, PCL, and MCL. His lateral meniscus was shredded, his kneecap dislocated, so did the tibiofibular joint. When doctors first assessed him, they weren't just thinking about basketball, they were talking about saving his leg. Blood flow had stopped. There was nerve damage risk. Amputation was on the table. Thankfully, the medical staff reduced the dislocation on the court, which got blood flowing again. A Doppler scan later confirmed his leg was viable. On March 13th, surgeons went in and did everything they could. Rebuilt the knee structure, repaired torn tissue, and stabilized joints. The rehab was brutal. Daily therapy, crutches, relearning how to walk. It took about 18 months before he was fully functional again. In that time, most people expected his career to be over, but he came back, slowly. He played just 22 games between 2008 and 2010, bouncing between teams and even the development league, but he kept working. By the time he landed with the Warriors, he was a trusted bench presence. He helped them win 3 titles. Steve Kerr called him a steadying force. His knee never fully healed. He still iced it daily years later. But Livingston's recovery wasn't just physical. It was a full-blown transformation. From nearly losing his leg to becoming a 3-time champion, Livingston's comeback wasn't just rare, it was historic. Jason Kidd's domestic abuse case. On January 19, 2001, Kidd was arrested in Paradise Valley, Arizona. His wife, Jumana Kidd, told police he hit her during an argument over feeding their son. She had a cut inside her mouth and visible swelling. Kidd pleaded guilty to misdemeanor spousal abuse. He was fined $200 and ordered to attend 6 months of anger management classes. He avoided jail time and had the record expunged later, though reports of the incident remained well documented. In January 2007, Kidd filed for divorce. In response, Jumana issued serious counterclaims, accusing him of years of abuse. She described multiple incidents: broken ribs, a concussion from being struck with a candlestick, and having her head smashed into a car console. She also alleged verbal abuse, infidelity, gambling, and alcohol problems. Kidd denied those claims, calling them exaggerated or fabricated. There were no new criminal charges from the divorce proceedings. Years later, when the Dallas Mavericks hired him as head coach in 2021, team CEO Cynthia Marshall confirmed they had in-depth discussions about his past abuse charge. The franchise acknowledged the incident and said they'd done their due diligence. The original plea in 2001 is an established legal fact. His later divorce proceedings surfaced broader allegations, but those claims were never proven in court. His public denial of the accusation stood, and his legal issues didn't resurface after that. Still, the domestic abuse case is a permanent part of his public record. It remains one of the most documented off-court controversies from his playing career. Charles Oakley's MSG arrest. February 8, 2017, Oakley was seated courtside during a Knicks game at Madison Square Garden. He was just a few seats from team owner James Dolan. As Kristaps Porzingis took free throws, security approached Oakley. They asked him to leave. Oakley refused, then everything escalated. Witnesses and video footage show Oakley pushing a security guard in the face and striking another. The scuffle unfolded right on live television. NYPD and MSG security swarmed him. He was dragged from his seat, handcuffed, and removed from the arena. Fans started chanting his name as he was led out. He was charged with 3 misdemeanor counts of assault and 1 count of criminal trespass. The Knicks released a statement calling his behavior abusive. Dolan followed up by firing MSG's head of security just 2 days later. A few months later, Oakley fired back. In September 2017, he filed a federal lawsuit against Dolan and MSG. He accused them of assault, battery, false imprisonment, and defamation. The case was dismissed in 2020, but appeals kept it alive. In late 2024, a judge ordered Dolan to testify after questions surfaced about missing security text messages. Privately, Oakley's life also took a hit. Reports say the incident contributed to a separation from his wife in 2018. The charges themselves were dropped after a plea deal. What started as a courtside confrontation turned into years of legal fighting. Oakley, once a fan favorite at the Garden, was now in the middle of one of the messiest NBA public team clashes in recent memory. It wasn't just about an ejection. It became personal and very public. Tom Gugliotta's GBL seizure. In December of 2000, Suns forward Tom Gugliotta collapsed on the team bus in Portland after a game against the Trailblazers. He had just taken an over-the-counter supplement marketed as a sleep and muscle recovery aid. What he didn't know was that the supplement contained gamma-butyrolactone, GBL. Minutes after ingestion, his body shut down. Gugliotta described the early symptoms as feeling like low-voltage electricity running through his body. He experienced twitching, a humming noise in his head, and extreme disorientation. Then he lost consciousness. His wife, Nikki, still on the phone during the call, heard his teammates shouting for medical help. EMTs rushed him from the bus to an ambulance. By that time, he was foaming at the mouth and seizing. His breathing slowed to the point where he couldn't breathe unaided. For 5 hours, machines kept him alive. If the episode had happened in the air or alone in a hotel, doctors said he likely wouldn't have survived. The product converted into GHB inside his body, an illegal substance often associated with party overdoses and assaults. At the time, it was still legal in supplement form. Gugliotta's experience helped trigger legislative pressure to ban it. The bigger issue? The supplement industry didn't have to prove products safe before sale. Only after incidents like his could something be pulled. And that's how GBL made it to shelves in the first place. Gugliotta's near-death experience became a warning. The product nearly killed him, and he wasn't the only one. Letters from families who lost children to GBL poured in. He'd survived. Others hadn't. Kwame Brown's media clapback. For years, Brown's name was basically code for failure in NBA conversations. Drafted number 1 overall out of high school in 2001 by the Wizards, expectations were massive, especially under Michael Jordan's watch. The problem? He didn't meet those expectations. Media outlets, especially ESPN, piled on. Stephen A. Smith repeatedly called him a bust, mocked his skills, and reduced him to a punchline. It didn't stop there. For nearly 2 decades, Brown's name was dragged in sports conversations. Analysts, radio hosts, and fellow players poked at his legacy. That included Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson, who joked about him on their podcast, All the Smoke, in 2021. That episode flipped a switch. In May of that year, Brown went on YouTube and unleashed a blistering hour-long tirade. He called out everyone: Barnes, Jackson, Stephen A., Jamel Hill, Charlemagne the God, DJ Envy, Angela Yee, and more. He accused them of bullying, exaggerating, and turning him into a media target. And he didn't hold back. Brown made it clear. He kept quiet since he was 17, but enough was enough. He said people mocked him for having small hands, slow feet, being immature, ignoring that he was a teenager entering the league under a microscope. He called it unjust and damaging. The response sparked real discussion. Critics started facing backlash for how they talked about players. Fans rallied around Brown's pushback. The moment became about more than just one player. It was a commentary on how media can shape, distort, and attack athletes' reputations for decades without facing any heat in return. Brown gave them some. Larry Johnson's bankruptcy collapse. Drafted number 1 overall in 1991, Johnson inked a 12-year deal worth $84 million just 2 years later. Around that time, he became a pop culture icon as Grandmama in Converse commercials and even showed up in full costume on Family Matters. But by March of 2015, things had unraveled. Johnson filed for bankruptcy in California. Court records showed he owed somewhere between $300,000 and $500,000. A big chunk of that came from unpaid child support and a $450,000 loan from Bank of America dating back to 2007. In one case, he reportedly owed over $890,000 in child support for just one child. He had to give up his California mansion during the bankruptcy process. When the dust settled in January of 2016, his account balance was $7,500. Despite earning over $80 million in his career, Johnson's financial collapse was a textbook example of mismanagement, unpaid obligations, and poor planning. After the bankruptcy, he kept a lower profile but stayed around the game, working with the Knicks in a basketball and business operations role. There were no new major scandals, but his story became part of a growing list of athletes who lost fortunes post-retirement. Johnson's grandmama persona was larger than life, but his real-life financial downfall proved brutal, costly, and entirely real. Lamar Odom's brothel overdose. On October 13, 2015, Odom was found unconscious at the Love Ranch, a legal brothel in Nevada. He'd been staying there for several days, reportedly spending $75,000 and engaging 2 women around the clock. A call to 911 mentioned cocaine use, but Odom later claimed someone may have slipped something into his drink. When staff found him, he was foaming at the mouth and completely unresponsive. Paramedics rushed him to a nearby hospital. He was too tall for a helicopter, then transferred him to Sunrise Hospital in Las Vegas. His condition was dire. He was placed on a ventilator and life support. Doctors said he suffered 12 strokes, 6 heart attacks, kidney failure, and his heart stopped twice. Toxicology reports revealed cocaine, opiates, and a Viagra-style stimulant called Reload 72 in his system. Odom insisted later he didn't knowingly take those drugs. He remained in a coma for several days. When he woke up, he couldn't walk or talk. The recovery was long and grueling. He went through months of rehabilitation, slowly regaining basic functions. His medical team called him a walking miracle given the extent of his trauma. The overdose became a major turning point. Odom later said it forced him to face his drug addiction and begin working toward recovery. He's spoken publicly about the experience many times since, including in his memoir, Darkness to Light. Despite the controversy and near-death circumstances, he survived what most wouldn't. His coma and collapse weren't just tabloid drama. They were a brutal, real moment that almost ended everything. And somehow he came back from it. TJ Ford's spinal injury saga. Ford's journey through the NBA was shaped by a diagnosis that hovered over his entire career: cervical spinal stenosis. Discovered in high school, the condition narrowed his spinal canal and made him dangerously susceptible to spinal trauma. In 2003, during a casual pickup game at Texas, Ford slammed his head into another player's thigh and went down. He couldn't feel anything below his neck for about 30 minutes. He feared he was paralyzed, but sensation gradually returned, and 2 weeks later, he was back to normal. Then came the NBA. In his rookie season with Milwaukee, in February of 2004, Ford took a hard fall after contact with Mark Madsen and instantly lost feeling. He was stretchered off the court and diagnosed with a spinal cord contusion. He underwent cervical fusion surgery in May of that year to stabilize the vertebrae between C3 and C4. The rehab was slow. He sat out the entire next season but returned to basketball with medical clearance. Doctors said he wasn't at heightened risk for paralysis anymore, but the reality was more complicated. In 2007, after a hit from Al Horford, Ford again lost feeling in his limbs during a game. He kept playing through it, but incidents like these kept coming. He experienced brief paralysis episodes and numbness. His spine just couldn't fully absorb the physical grind. In March of 2012, after catching an elbow from Baron Davis, Ford called it. He retired, saying the risk was too great. It wasn't just about pain, it was about survival. Despite spinal surgery and recurring trauma, he played 9 seasons. His story isn't about what he lost. It's about how far he pushed through something most athletes never face. Vincent Askew's arrest. In August of 2008, former NBA player Vincent Askew was arrested in Miami-Dade, Florida, accused of having sex with a 16-year-old girl in a hotel room. According to police, Askew had told the girl he was recruiting for a prep school. Court records later show that the charge of sexual activity with a minor was dropped. Askew instead pleaded guilty to child abuse with no great bodily harm. The court withheld adjudication of guilt, meaning he wasn't formally convicted. The court stated that he wasn't likely to engage in a criminal pattern and didn't require the full penalty under the law. He was placed on probation for 3 years, which he completed in 2011. Years later, Askew continued working in youth basketball. In 2017, he was invited to lead a holiday youth camp in Guam. The program's organizer, Elsa Ulloa, acknowledged the arrest, but said Askew had been transparent about it and that she was satisfied with his explanation. Askew told her that the incident was a setup, claiming it was a scheme for money. He also said the NBA conducted its own investigation in 2009 and cleared him, noting that he continued to appear in NBA content like 2K. Ulloa defended the decision to include him in the camp, stating that if he'd been convicted, he wouldn't be part of NBA-affiliated media. Despite the past controversy, Askew's professional basketball background, including a finals appearance with the Supersonics and a strong college career, kept him connected to the sport in youth development roles. Andrew Toney's career breakdown. Toney's downfall began late in the 1984 season when he started complaining of foot pain. The Sixers medical staff said nothing was wrong, but Toney knew something was off. Frustrated, he got a private evaluation. Turns out he had stress fractures in both feet. Instead of resting, he kept playing. By the next season, he was clearly in pain and managed just 6 games. Over the final years of his career, the injuries only got worse. The stress fractures never fully healed, and his mobility was gone. His career, which started strong, crumbled fast. But what made things worse wasn't just the pain, it was how the Sixers handled it. Ownership, especially Harold Katz, reportedly doubted Toney's claims. The team even ordered drug tests on him, trying to suggest his pain was in his head or from some other cause. That shattered his trust in the organization. Toney quietly stepped away from the game by age 30. He only played 7 seasons, and realistically, only 5 were healthy. And this wasn't a bench player. Toney was an all-star. He was the guy Boston fans called the Strangler because of how he dismantled the Celtics in the playoffs. He helped deliver the 1983 championship. He stayed away from the team and the city for years. Fans online still talk about how badly things were handled. One called it out plainly: he was forced to play with broken feet. Toney eventually resurfaced in 2012, easing back into the Sixers family. But the way his career ended still sticks out. A warning about medical mistrust, and a reminder that talent isn't enough when support disappears. Smush Parker's Kobe fallout. Parker landed with the Lakers in 2005 and started at point guard for 2 seasons. But his time next to Kobe Bryant came with more than just minutes. It came with friction. Kobe reportedly told Parker he wasn't allowed to talk to him unless he had more accolades. He also said publicly that Parker should have never been in the NBA, blaming the Lakers for being too cheap to pay for a real point guard. That kind of public dismissal hit hard. Parker lost his starting spot and shortly after fell out of the league. His NBA career ended in 2008 after just 5 more games. The sharp fall from starting for the Lakers to playing overseas left him reeling. In interviews years later, Parker opened up about how that experience affected his mental health. He described feelings of isolation and failure, saying the Kobe feud lingered in his mind long after his playing days ended. He admitted the criticism cut deep and left him questioning his worth in the league. By 2023, he appeared on Pablo Torre Finds Out, where he shared how never resolving things with Kobe still bothered him. He wished they'd spoken, that something could have been cleared before Kobe's death. Parker's story isn't just about on-court struggles, it's about how personal tensions, public judgment, and unmet expectations can derail more than just stats. For Parker, it shaped his career and haunted him for years after. Tyler Ulis's near-fatal crash and comeback. In late February 2022, Tyler Ulis was driving south on Interstate 75 in Michigan when another vehicle, traveling the wrong way, collided head-on into his car. The impact left him with multiple broken bones, a fractured left ankle, both wrists, plus additional breaks in one foot, along with cuts and bruises. But luckily, no reported head trauma. Soon after the crash, Ulis had surgery on his ankle. Photos from his recovery showed casts on both arms and a leg. By mid-2022, he still couldn't walk and required assistance with basic tasks. Rehabilitation was slow. He began walking after about 6 months, started running around month 10, and needed roughly a year to regain full mobility. Before the accident, Ulis hadn't played since 2020 with the Sacramento Kings G League affiliate. The severity of his injuries and the prolonged recovery effectively ended any hopes of returning to professional basketball. Instead, he stayed close to the game through coaching. During the 2022-23 season, he joined the University of Kentucky as a student assistant coach, and in September 2024, he became an assistant coach with the Arkansas Razorbacks. His journey went from catastrophe to transformation, from the wreck on I-75 to guiding players from the sidelines. What could have ended his story is now his new beginning. Greg Anthony's sting. Greg Anthony got caught up in a DC mess when he answered what he thought was an escort ad. It wasn't. It was part of a police sting. And when he met the undercover officer in a hotel room, things went downhill fast. The officer mentioned it'd be $80 for intercourse. And Anthony, apparently not the sharpest tool in that moment, followed up asking about costumes. Yes, costumes. This happened in a DoubleTree hotel around 5:46 in the evening. Very glamorous. Once everything hit the fan, he was slapped with a misdemeanor solicitation charge. Both CBS Sports and Turner Sports gave him the boot, suspending him indefinitely. He did make a public apology, saying it was a lapse in judgment and that he felt the embarrassment. I mean, obviously. To keep the charge from sticking, he entered into a deferred prosecution agreement about a month later. He had to knock out 32 hours of community service and keep his nose clean for 4 months. If he pulled that off, the charge would vanish. And yes, he did it. Reports even confirmed he used a computer to hunt down the ad and make arrangements. Not subtle. Everything was fully documented, from the location to the minute-by-minute takedown. The legal resolution meant no lasting criminal record, but professionally, it cost him. His public image took a direct hit, and networks don't forget stuff like this. It wasn't just a personal embarrassment. It became a public broadcast scandal that followed him far beyond the hotel room. Ben Gordon's spiral. Ben Gordon's post-NBA life's been a non-stop chaos parade, and it's all tied to his battles with bipolar disorder and depression. He's been upfront about it, writing in February 2020 about a suicide attempt and the emotional freefall after basketball. The guy went from scoring in the league to struggling, just to stay afloat mentally. Fast forward to April 4th, 2023, his 40th birthday, and instead of cake, he got handcuffs. He was arrested in a Connecticut juice bar after acting completely out of control. Police found a folding knife, a stun gun, and brass knuckles on him. Not your average smoothie run. He ended up in an 18-month diversion program that could wipe the charges if he finishes it by September 2025. In late 2022, things got even wilder. First, he reportedly punched his son at an airport. Then, a month later, he was out here stabbing people with sewing needles and getting into fights with McDonald's security in Chicago. Before that, back in 2017, he yanked fire alarms in his apartment, assaulted someone at a wellness center, and allegedly threatened his apartment manager with a knife. Just pure mayhem. His lawyer blamed the Connecticut incident on mental instability, a declined bank card, and some diet stress. Gordon's since gone through over 55 therapy sessions and even got support from his old coach Jim Calhoun. He's making moves to get his life on track, and the legal system's focus more on help than punishment. Still, his story's a brutal reminder of how hard post-career life can hit, especially when mental health issues are in the mix. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here. I would greatly appreciate it if you could subscribe. Thanks for watching.